Obligatory, this happened a few years ago when I was a child. My family and I are dirt poor, and not only that, I have horrible social anxiety, especially at the time of this incident. So, because we were so poor, my mother couldn't afford a babysitter. We had moved away from our family after an abusive past as well. We lived in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, so Mom never really worried about crimes or possible criminals. Because of this, she would leave me in the car as she and my siblings went shopping. I had social anxiety, as said, so I was fine with it and actually preferred to stay in the car. I had a phone, doors locked, yada yada. No need to be worried, or so one would think. Of course, in one instance, that was wrong. I was chilling in the front seat playing some music, on my phone and all that. I never really paid too much attention to cars driving by, mostly paid attention to the people that walked just a bit too close and would make me somewhat nervous. That was until suddenly, when this old red purplish beaten-to-hell car pulled in right in front of me. I spared a glance on instinct. There were two people in the car, a skinny yet tall man with a stained white shirt, and a bigger, yet again tall woman. Nothing too out of the ordinary, so no red flags right away. I just expected them to go on throughout their day and all. I stopped paying attention and went back to playing on my phone. A few minutes later, I had gotten bored from just scrolling through social media. I set down my phone and looked up, thinking I was just going to be staring off into space or something. Nope. What I saw had my heart racing immediately. The two people in the car had in fact not gone about their day. They were there, sitting just as they were, except for one thing. They were staring intensely and smiling at me. Not that type of, oh hey, you saw me, so now I feel I have to give a polite smile and wave. No, it was a smile that showed off these yellow rotting teeth and sent chills down my spine. I immediately freaked out, my anxiety spiking, and I wondered what the hell they were doing just sitting there staring at me. I averted my eyes from them, hoping they hadn't seen me staring or the panic in my expression. Except they must have. Suddenly, the beaten car started up. After sitting there doing nothing for what must have been at least 5 minutes, they started up the car. My anxiety went out of control when I spared another glance upward. The skinny man in the driver's side was reaching below him, and when he came back up, he had a knife, and not one of those small, easily portable ones either. It was huge. The knife was already protruding out. I panicked, and my fight-or-flight response kicked in. I couldn't even think. I grabbed my phone and bolted as fast as I could. I even left the car on, keys behind and everything. I just took off. And the thing was, the minute I began to make a run for it, their door opened. It made a long and ear-splitting screech, which was how I knew someone was getting out of that car the minute I started to leave mine. I didn't spare a glance, though. I just ran and ran, until I made it to my mom in the supermarket and told her what happened. She freaked out because I had left the keys in the car and decided to go outside to get them. All of my siblings and I came back with me as well. But when we got to the car, the people were long gone. No car, nothing. And nothing had been stolen either. I had left the car unlocked and running, yet somehow nothing seemed to be touched. It was the perfect opportunity to steal or rummage through the car. I still don't know what was really going to happen. The parking lot wasn't exactly packed, but I couldn't quite say it was empty either. How were they planning on using that knife? Someone was bound to notice. Still, had me paranoid for the next few shopping trips, and I always went in with my family after that. I'm on my phone, so excuse any mistakes. Keyboard warriors, I swear this story is real. You just can't make this crazy shit up. When I was around 11 years old in 2014, my family and I had just moved from Tennessee to Texas as my dad was working on a deal for a new job. My brother and I were homeschooled at this time, which meant we could move in with my aunt and uncle with no problems relating to finding a house in a good school district, but that's a little beside the point. My family was pretty close back then, and all of the cousins got along just fine. We loved to do everything together actually, especially me and my female cousin Peyton. My immediate family, meaning me, mom, dad, brother, and sister, had spent the last 7 years without a jack-in-the-box. It was terrible. We were all born in Texas, so we loved it, but living in Tennessee, we just had to go without it. This particular night, however, all our parents had gone out to dinner and told us very specifically not to leave the house. We were to lock the doors after they left and play games together or something. You may possibly be thinking this now becomes about an intruder, but I promise you this is 10 times more bizarre. After the parents had left, all of us cousins got together, and we decided we really wanted some ice cream and candy. Not that it's important, but I remember Ben & Jerry's being the main target, so we devised this foolproof plan to sneak out and acquire the goods. Well, we thought it was foolproof at least. My older sister, the driver, my cousin Peyton, and I all loaded into my dad's car that had been left at the house, and off we were to go get the food. We should have never left. On our way to the store to get the snacks, we decided that Jack-in-the-Box sounded much better than just some sugar, so off we went. The drive was full of Bruno Mars and Meghan Trainor. How perfect does that sound for 2014? As we pulled up to the drive-thru, we decided that it was about 3 cars too long and we would just go inside and order instead. Wrong choice. When we stepped inside, there was one girl in the restaurant. She was short with a small figure, wearing winter clothes, so she looked completely ready for an outing. The girl asked the cashier for a water cup and proceeded to fill it with either Sprite or some other soda. I remember the guy at the register looking at her extremely confused, but it was late at night and he couldn't care less, I'm sure. Once she finished filling up her cup, she drank it extremely quickly and started to turn around to throw the cup out and leave. I have an awful memory, but I do remember her eyes being wide open, as if she had just seen something scarring. At this point, we had been standing at the entrance doors for the entire interaction, just watching for whatever reason. I guess we were really just very nosy. But as she was walking out, I looked down and noticed she was gripping a large knife. You guys, this thing was huge. Immediately, my heart dropped. I heard my cousin whispering, "Oh my god, no way," or something like that. So the knife-wielding girl leaves the restaurant. We go on to order our food, talking about it to the man at the register and kind of laughing it off, but also still very confused. As we begin to leave with the food, we see the girl crossing the street to the CVS. It was kind of late at this point, but there were still a good number of cars driving on this road at the time. She didn't even look either way, just crossed with ease as if invincible. We brushed it off and assumed she was just doing her own thing, but after a while of eating some tacos and talking about how fun it was to be out without permission, we suddenly saw a dozen police lights starting to stream into the CVS parking lot. Like I said before, we were quite nosy, so we decided to do what any nosy person does: investigate. We drove over to the CVS, and we were stopped in the parking lot by an officer who began to ask us questions. My memory gets a bit hazy here, but I remember it was a problem because my cousin and I were both minors at the time, or something about being minors and involving ourselves with the police was a problem. They asked us a couple questions, and I remember my sister and my cousin explaining the girl wielding the knife at the Jack-in-the-Box across the street. With that, they let us go, and we hurried back home. A bit later that night, everyone, parents included, were winding down for bed. Our mothers called the 3 of us into the rooms in the house to talk about something. I don't think any of us realized they knew what we had done. They sat us down and calmly asked what we did tonight. I think we lied, but I don't quite remember. Either way, it was useless. They knew everything, even what we didn't know ourselves. Our moms told us that someone on Facebook had posted about 3 heroic girls that knew information about the girl in the situation that I'm about to explain to you. Heroic? Hardly. All we did was answer a few questions. Nosy, that's more like it. Well, they told us that the girl had entered the CVS, grabbed a woman by the hair, and proceeded to hold the knife to her throat for several minutes, holding her hostage before the police could show up. Apparently, people had tried to get her off, but it was useless. After all, she had had the weapon. She was just screaming, being violent and lashing out at everyone, but it was so much years ago that I can't quite remember the details. It's not the end of the world kind of story, but to this day I still think how easily it could have been one of us with a knife to the throat in a Fort Worth Jack-in-the-Box, or how easily someone could have just been killed. But if it wasn't for the girl, we would have gotten through that night with our foolproof plan. So hey, Jack-in-the-Box crazy knife girl, let's not meet again. We never got candy or ice cream, only PTSD. Long-time reader, first-time writer. I'm Spanish, so I apologize in advance if there are any mistakes. So let's get right to it. This story started years ago, when I was only 5 years old. I'm 27 now, and I'm a female as well. I lived with my parents and my sister at the time, the average working-class family, nothing out of the ordinary. Very happy times, actually. We moved to a different house in the same town, but I was sent to a new school, because this one was way closer now. It is curious that I have these times blurred in my memory because I was very young, but there are some days I can see as clear as water, and this is one of them. My first day of this new school, I was of course very nervous. I wasn't the most extroverted talking kid. I was extremely shy and insecure, and I still am to this day, actually. Once there was a very sweet and loving woman who came and explained that she was my new teacher, but now it was English time, so she took me to this class. There they were, my new schoolmates, and my new English teacher. We'll name him LC. He was a man in his 30s, short, fat, and with a big black mustache. If you got closer, you could make out food debris and saliva through it. It was fucking disgusting, to be honest. We all agreed that he was very much a Super Mario lookalike. He welcomed me and introduced me to the kids. I said hi and sat with them all on the floor. Many of them introduced themselves, some made jokes, and they all seemed very nice and easygoing. I was somewhat relieved. I felt integrated almost immediately. LC proceeded, and he told me to stand up and go to the front of the class to practice the basics. My name is, I'm 5 years old, etc. I say it once. He makes me say it again a bit louder. Did I mention I was super shy? I say it twice. He tells me to repeat, insisting I must still speak louder. I say it for the third time, but it seems it's just never enough. His tone began to sound angry, and he repeats. His tone began to sound angry, and he repeats. Again, again, again. He had me repeating that shit until I started crying, when he finally told me to sit down. My new mates told me it was okay. He was just an asshole. My mom later asked me about my day at school, and I said everything was fine except for that teacher, LC. I started crying and told her I didn't want to go to his class ever again. There was just something about him, something dark. I didn't know quite what it was, but I still felt it, and he scared the shit out of me. Always trust your gut. The following weeks, I would keep whining to my mom all of the mornings I had English. But what could she do? She tried to calm me down, saying it was okay to have fun with my new friends, and that he was just a grumpy old teacher. I went to that school for 4 more years. I got used to him and his peculiar character. For example, he got really pissed when a kid was late to his class, so he yelled and told them to wait outside, sitting on the floor by the door thinking. We were actually scared to be late. But there were also some days when he was just nice and fun. Time passed, nothing out of the ordinary, except for one thing. He'd talk a lot about the FBI. We'd be with the computers in class, visiting the FBI website, reading about the most wanted criminals and things like that. not the average English lesson for 9-year-old kids. He took pictures of us, saying they were for the design of our own personalized FBI identification, kind of like a game. But that never happened. We didn't think anything too weird about it. In Christmas time, he had taken a picture of the class to design a postcard. Years later, when I was in high school, an old classmate from that school reached out and asked me, "Hey, have you seen the news? LC was found dead." I looked for it online, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. Police had recently found that LC was a pedophile. In fact, the amount of material found on his computers and hard drives was so vast, it made him one of the biggest pedos in the whole country. When LC knew police were after him, he killed himself, jumping in the sea near the town's port to finally drown. Then I remember that day when he didn't stop until I cried. I remember he scared me so much I didn't want to go to school. His FBI obsession, all those photos, everything made sense. That darkness I felt around him. Due to his death, I can no longer meet LC. What a good thing to know. My roommate brings girls home on a regular basis. I've been mostly okay with it because so far they have been quiet and respectful, plus my girlfriend is here often too. I always sleep with earplugs because I usually like to sleep until 8 or 9 a.m. They're super strong, so I really don't hear anything when I'm fast asleep. Well, at around 5 a.m., the doorbell starts ringing so repeatedly that eventually I do wake up despite this. The apartment door is old and thin, and has a large frosted glass window, so it's possible to make out silhouettes behind it and also talk through it. There's no one there, so I check if the door is locked. It isn't, so I lock it very quickly. I go back to bed, but they just keep ringing. My roommate sometimes works until late at night, so I think maybe it's him, and he's just forgotten the keys, even though he would have probably called me on the phone instead. I get up to check again. Big mistake. This time there's someone in front of the glass. They got past the building's front door. I ask who it is, and I hear a woman saying that she was just here, and she forgot her purse with her ID and driver's license. She really needs it back right now. Sounds pretty fishy, right? I tell her to come back in the morning, but she still persists. She keeps ringing, and I also hear more voices whispering behind her. At this point, I'm pretty sure there's some strangers trying to rob us, and I should have already called the police. But then she asks me if my roommate is there, calling him by his first name. I tell her that he isn't, but she keeps asking me to open the door. I even check his room, but it's dark and I can see his bed is empty. Now she's threatening to call the police, and for a moment, my sleepy self is considering the possibility that maybe my roommate really does have her purse, and I should just let her in and get this over with. I ask her for her name, and she starts yelling that it's none of my business. Suddenly, I hear a man shout, "Let us in, or we will break the door." Sure enough, they're starting to try and force it open. I realize this situation is bad. I go back to my room and call 911 immediately, while also planning a potential escape route from the tree near my window. After a few minutes though, everything is really quiet once again. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rings, and this time I see blue uniforms through the glass. I open up the door and explain what just happened, still convinced these were just some random people trying to rob me. The strangers weren't there anymore. The police now ask if my roommate is home as well, and if they can check his room. I let them in, and then a major plot twist happens. The roommate was in his room the entire time, hiding away in a corner. Not only that, he knew these people, but he was so much of an asshole and coward that he let me deal with the situation alone while pretending he wasn't home. Suddenly, a full police squad is in the apartment. Here comes the second plot twist. They immediately arrest my roommate. The woman and her friend are at the building's front door, talking with the police. They aren't being arrested though. They called the police too, actually, exactly when I did. It doesn't take much time to realize what's just happened. The police start asking me some questions. If I heard roommate and the girl having sex, I give them my honest statement. I hear the police whispering, something about a sexual assault. I hadn't heard any of it when it happened because I was sleeping with earplugs. A forensic team joins in, and they search through the roommate's room and collect evidence. They all leave finally at noon. Needless to say, I moved out as fast as I could.